I am not David Lynch. I am about to explain the hell out of this video because I need you to understand this is my best work. I know there's this law of how the general rule of doing YouTube is consistency, but for video essayists, we seem to be the exception. A video might even get more buzz than usual if you step away for a while. I have always been a sort of glitch in the matrix because that has never been the case for me. Every time I take a little bit longer than usual to put out a video, it flops. It bombs dramatically. Typically it will pick up steam eventually, a sort of delayed reaction, but it does suck just a weensy bit when you put your entire heart and soul into something, and the algorithm punishes you for doing exactly that within the first couple weeks at least. I'm hoping that the mysterious algorithm magic happens again because, like I said, I truly believe this is my best video, and I am going to explain to you in this video exactly why. So if you haven't seen it, you can check it out, or if you have, share it. I don't know, this platform doesn't like me. This platform is very mean to me, and it's small stuff like that that keeps me going. But anyway, this video is very much the culmination of every conversation I've had on this platform so far, in every video, both on main, even on this channel, hell, even some videos you can't see on YouTube anymore. I was planning to very autistically go into exactly how every video is in this one, but the script got really long, and I have questions to get into later. But believe me, if you are one of my really parasocial viewers and you look through all of them, it is all there, even though one of the core themes of the video, especially towards the end, is that there is something inherently, systematically, exploitative and twisted about the form of the YouTube video essay. Like I said in the video itself, I've been wanting to make it literally for years, but it was just too daunting. On my Patreon at the beginning of each year, I make a list of videos I plan to do that year. If you scroll down to last year, you can see that even from then it was there. It was supposed to be my first video to start this year out. I started writing it from December, but I realized how thick it was going to be, and I came up with a little bonus video that became the letterboxd and the end of the world video. I'd been thinking about the topic since I watched Dancehall Queen in my freshman year almost 3 full years ago because of the interesting point that my lecturer made, which was that while the film is about the male gaze and subverts the male gaze in its text, it was directed by a man. It was written by a woman, but it was directed by a man. And we, as the audience, are still gazing with the eyes of a man at these women shaking their butts. Then a year later, House of Tabula, or as they were then called, Cinema Cartography, made that damn video, and I will not lie to you, I was genuinely kinda traumatized. I was weighing whether or not to mention the video directly because, as you all must know, I hate reactionary call-out drama adjacent stuff. But that channel is literally responsible for half the DNA of my video essay structure, and their stuff was invaluable to my evolution of art thought when I was in my infamous gap year. That video made me realize that there are probably some things fundamentally about how I view art that are flawed because of how much I had taken from their form of analysis and how much I got out of their form of analysis. Like, I was working on my Orson Welles video at that time, and you can see it in there. It was structured as a sort of crisis of faith thing where I am unpacking that there might be some fundamental ways that I view art and my role as an artist that I need to work through. Towards the end, I suggest that so much of how I viewed Wells and his work is filtered through this very Eurocentric great man narrative, and the choice to take it in that direction was a direct result of this video. Though at that point, of course, my thought had grown. That's how I was even able to see and discern that something was wrong with their video. But like many in the comments said, it was probably more of a mask-off moment. I decided then and there that I would tackle this topic. Maybe to reconcile something within myself and perhaps add something to culture. But what kept bugging me and keeping me away from the topic and scaring me from the topic was the question of, am I built to make this video actually? Do I have the perspective? Am I equipped? There are lots of black femme creators who've spoken about these topics in some way or another already. Why does it continue to tug me though? What am I trying to prove? I was only able to go through with the video when I realized that precisely was my topic. You can tell me if I did or didn't pull it off, but thematically this is my most reflective, holistic meta video to date, yet it is also somehow probably, I hope, my least indulgent. I wrote this and composed it in the edit to be a video essay about the creation and consumption of video essays. The most immediate topic and what I did genuinely want to do the knowledge and due diligence on was spaces and the policing of black women's bodies, and more broadly, the long struggle of the existence of black art and expression in general in the space of Western colonialist white supremacist consumer capitalism. The fact that Sinners came out while I was actively working on this was crazy, because the film is about the exact same thing. I even mentioned in my letterboxd review that one scene is pretty much the ending that I had planned for my video. The only reason I didn't reference Sinners at any point in the video was because I didn't want people to think I was inspired by the movie. I've been working on this thing damn too long for people to think I just watched the movie and said, hey, that looks interesting. Ryan Coogler and I just share the same brain, I'm afraid. But the deeper topic of the video, I mean, there are a few, but the biggest one was the problem of performance and spectacle. The general concept of whether or not the value of things is determined by their environment and or utility. You know, whether concepts can exist in a material sense when seen by the other, or if it's all games. If it's all an intellectual activity. The great meta aspect of the video is that the video questions whether making a video about this topic at all is worth it, and if the real ideas, real feelings, real weight, real pains, joys, and all that can be captured with words, can be captured over screens, through a medium that turns out what we call content, or if it's all just intellectual game. The title itself is ironic. Whatever YouTube's algorithm forces me to call it, the title of the video is The Twerking Essay, in air quotes, because, and I have a whole paragraph about that in the written version, which can be accessed on my Patreon. I called it that because that's what I always call in videos when I refer to them in passing. You know, the Sonic video, the Barbie video, the Boy Meets World video. If you've watched any of those and you know my stuff, all of those videos are about like 10 things. But boiling it down to that simple, commodifiable, marketable soundbite makes it more palatable. You're skirting past all the weight of what is actually contained in there for the sake of convenience. That is the experience of black people. That is the experience of women. That is the experience of being any performer who's ever had to exist in the public eye in any capacity. In certain spaces, you stop being a person and you become an easily commodifiable concept that exists for others' convenience. The video itself is structured that way. It starts out pretending to just be about butts, but then quickly, as you dig in, as you unpack the issue, as you delve further into the topic, you find all this weight, all this baggage, all this complexity, all these contradictions, and all this confusion. But in the end, you can just walk away and continue living your life. Hell, you don't even have to finish the video. Bro, I lost a few subscribers on initial upload, man. I mean, I knew the topic was hot. I didn't know it was that hot. That's the meta-contextual structure, but there's also the aspect of me making the video. I have, once again, voluntarily stepped into women's business. Last time I did that, I lost sleep out of guilt that I, with my patriarchy brain, might be missing out on some nuances, even though almost everyone who watched it said it was good. So what you'll find in this video is that I directly made that a part of the message. This is a video that's meant to be watched actively. Like I said, you might miss some things. There is a lot of performativity and gray area, very much a Nathan Fielder aspect of my performance of myself in this video, but ultimately everything I'm saying comes from a place of truth. And I deliberately acknowledge, whether in the text or in the editing, certain points where my own biases and blindness holds me. I interviewed my friend for that reason. I know we think about a few things differently, and she could be a voice of the female perspective. I was considering interviewing other YouTubers who do speak about these issues, but after talking to her, I realized I kind of couldn't. None of the questions would make a lot of sense, and low-key it would be kind of dehumanizing. Like, if you're on the Patreon and see the full interview, the first batch of questions were stuff I designed specifically for her because I know her as a person and her specific experiences, and low-key those answers were way more valuable for me than the questions I asked specifically about booty shaking. I feel like there is a lesson even in that, and I decided to implement the fact that I do ultimately still have gaps into the point of the video itself. I want the audience to question if the person speaking to them is the most qualified to talk about this topic, both in my direct acknowledgement of the distance I have from the dance hall and the church, probably collective groups in general, anime video coming soon. I acknowledge that I feel funny saying the word cocky. I acknowledge my sort of sheltered middle class position. In fact, halfway through there's a point where I half pretend to crash out when reading Ice Spice's song lyrics. That's because originally one of the gags, and you can see it in the introduction, the gag is me saying these very raunchy or, air quotes, vulgar things, vulgar lyrics, with my proper video essayist speaking voice. That itself is a part of the meta commentary of, is this the right medium for this conversation? But halfway through I realized this is a video essay. Ice Spice in the narrative of this video essay is this sort of tragic anti-hero / cautionary tale adjacent thing, and the problematic nature of even that kind of dehumanization is a part of the point. But what is the power dynamic here? Is this not sort of what Ben Shapiro does when he low-key, high-key demeans and dehumanizes black art? In my mind, the joke was supposed to be on me, and I do try to keep it that way in the editing, but it also might translate as me putting down this vulgar language or hoodlum, air quotes, vulgar language, air quotes, hoodlum behavior. Maybe that is what I was doing even subconsciously. In any case, the narrative arc here starts from me genuinely just finding the topic interesting, sort of following a morbid curiosity rabbit hole, and the tone reflects that, I think. The front half is filled with jokes and euphemisms, even with the whole Assman thing. But the further you follow the rabbit hole, the darker it gets. Like with the doji section, that crash out is very real. Like I say in the video, I knew, and that was the whole point. But working on this in the past few months, watching every other week some black woman gets under attack for rubbish, like the doji hate mob was genuinely actually it was so infuriating. Like this stuff is genuinely so real. Genuinely, when editing that part, I seriously considered going back and redoing the intro because I felt like it was kind of disrespectful almost. How lighthearted and half ironic the tone of it was. This is why I include that bit from Fritz the Cat with which the damn YouTube censors made me chop up to pieces. That whole sequence when Fritz, a cat, codified for white person, enters the crow, metaphor for black, Jim Crow, space with his fake white liberal nonsense. They only let him in because he has money. A black sex worker realizes he has money and gets him high and sends him into a jungle fever frenzy. He bangs her. You see almost none of this sequence in the YouTube cut. And he immediately decides to lead the black revolution himself, perhaps just for the kicks. Gets the man who took him into the space in the first place killed when he tries to protect him, and ultimately Fritz is able to just slip away and move on to his next adventure. Look, Fritz the Cat is not a perfect film. It is very messy and problematic in a lot of ways, but that is some damn good social satire, I think, which does accurately capture the narrative arc I'm trying to communicate here. It's a dynamic that I have noticed ever since I found out that my gender hang-ups were the fault of patriarchy. I went from being the evangelical conservative. Well, no, was I ever really a big conservative? It's conservative ideologically, not necessarily in action. I never told anyone slurs. I never told anyone to go in no damn kitchen. But I went from that to being a big feminist. My most viewed video and the one that got me in the algorithm in the first place were both about women's issues. It's always been pretty easy for me to talk about this stuff. The trouble comes though when I think, is this my place though? But discoursing about these things has been a bit easy for me, maybe because of my removal. And I think about this kind of content on YouTube, videos about social issues pertaining to certain groups. I very deliberately, part of why I don't and can't just stay in my lane on YouTube topic-wise, is because I have different sides and I know how this platform works. But what happened last year, one of the things was that I realized I legitimately cannot go on talking about larger issues without putting some time to focus on my own place in the world. I'm too confused about myself to tell anything to others. So I make those into topics of my videos, my religious hang-ups, my nationality, my gender stuff, my mental stuff. But we don't live on a platform designed for three-dimensional people. We live in a platform designed for easy, commodifiable, consumable ideas. On that question of what you're trying to prove, you ever notice how almost every black content creator who makes video essays has made at least one video about hip-hop? I mean, everyone has to be at least somewhat hip-hop literate. Well, by my own admission in the video, I ain't even admit to myself that I liked hip-hop until like 2022. I always had a base level of knowledge, though I know more about the history of Jamaican music because we're taught that as children. It's such an integral part of our culture. And I went into a lot of that in the video. It was only like last year, during said summer of depression, when I got into Earl, that I had to quite deliberately teach myself about hip-hop. And it is valuable, don't get me wrong. I think I genuinely benefited so much. That's one of the big things I have taken away from this video. I did so much research I think has benefited my perspectives, but I had to research all of that because of an invisible pressure that I can feel. Dude, FD Signifier, the CEO of Blackness and probably by proxy hip-hop video essays, is subscribed to me. I don't want him to call me a larper, but it is just that, you know. I've decided to embrace the coating, the tools that the world has given me, knowing that they are also used to dehumanize. But I cannot speak about the Red Shoes and Dancehall Queen without acknowledging that one of them is on the Criterion Collection, which I only ordered online for status reasons, and the other one's available for only low quality on YouTube. The words are important, but I bless all of you and continue to do it. But I got a whole surge of patrons when I made a video where I spoke about Caribbean pain. I'm quite aware that a lot of the eyeballs viewing me and ears hearing me are here because they've never engaged with someone from my particular demographic talking about some of the things that I do. So I become their Jamaican, I become their autists. I mean, most video essays are neurodivergent. But I do look at my fellow creators from certain groups, and I won't lie to you, I get depressed. I don't think I could live with myself if I made so much content about things that bring me pain. But already I have felt myself start to get eaten. I speak about the House of Tabula video very directly because it is probably worth hearing these ideas engaged with by someone from a different background than them. They are European. I am the Europeanized. What I speak about in my video, I don't know how many people are interested, or those who are interested will feel what I'm saying beyond the realm of intellectual discourse. Some do, some did, some have. But how many, proportionately? But maybe that is indeed the point. That's the real problem with postmodernism, you know. Every potential flaw in this video, every time I mispronounce someone's name or flub a line or reveal a flaw in myself, could be argued to be a part of the point. And a lot of that in the video was done under levels of realism and performance. Real things I played into. Fake things I really entertained. Again, very Nathan Fielder, very Warhol. The section titled The Art of a Killing specifically might truly be the best thing I have ever put on YouTube. That is my canon. That is, if I've done nothing else on YouTube, if I've had no other legacy or anything, that section is my contribution to culture and discourse on this platform. It is done almost in the style of something I used to include in my video essays quite a bit. The intermission, or interlude, I kinda flip-flopped. See Trapped in my Barbie video, or What They Did to Mary in my Wolf of Wall Street video. The point of that section is to break the form of the video, diverging from the immediate surface level topic to talk about the core theme at the heart of it more directly in another way. This wasn't quite that because the intermissions usually had almost nothing to do directly with the topic, but the stuff in that section was sprinkled throughout the entire video, and stuff from the main video found its way in as well. I will say this, my video largely critiques the structure and the form of the video essay, but CEO of Blackness, FD Signifier, kind of revitalized my appreciation for the role of the video essay with his recent Beyonce video, actually. Video essays are like a way of displaying your appreciation and respect for something precisely by engaging with it critically, to take things out of it for a viewer so that they might engage with it in a different way. In The Art of a Killing, I am more or less taking the argument that House of Tabula made, and instead of putting it down or calling them fascists, acknowledging the very real truth in the problem they are identifying, but giving it that necessary context and structural analysis that their video was lacking. Cutting between them and bell hooks, both calling culture's fascination with transgression, is, if I do say so myself, one of my proudest editing moments. Except the missing piece is, of course, the question of why is this thing considered transgressive in the first place? What you will notice if you watch the video or the clips I took is that the baseness of mainstream culture that House of Tabula is speaking about are largely appropriated tropes from African American art that have been stripped of their context and used in this highly commodifiable form. A real issue, and one that I am in agreement with them on, but the way that they framed it was problematically wrong because of that missing context. These are cultural signifiers that were created from certain real social realities and removed of that meaning, removed of that context, removed of that thing for purely financial gain. One of the things I was fighting with them people on in the comments of the original video was, I remember someone directly calling my insistence that attacking twerking is racialized, postmodern nonsense. I don't know if I could articulate it this way then, but the question stuck with me. Is this guy telling me right now that Blackness is postmodern nonsense? Of course, it's more complicated than that, but I was brought back to my fascination with the avant-garde. Why do I like the avant-garde? I think about the tourism thing, the beaches, the outskirts of everything bit, the exoticism, the romanticization of suffering, the commodification of suffering. Have I wrapped myself up in a frame that's slowly turning me into a party of myself? I'll tell you why this thing took me 6 months just to write. I am used to speaking about mediums I know basically like the back of my hand. I haven't seen every sitcom, but I know the sitcom. I haven't seen every film movement, but I know film. I did have to do a bag of research for all this just to be able to have the confidence to put pen to paper. I had to listen to whole discographies, several albums over and over, and you're not even seeing most of that in the video. This is just due diligence. Then, of course, if you're following this channel, you know about my graphic novel, which I am way behind on. And because of editing, I haven't been able to draw in like weeks. I mean, what you're seeing here, I made like last minute, just a few hours. It took me like maybe 7 hours in total. Oh, Jesus. I drew just for this video. This is probably the longest it's been between complete creative projects for me. I actually don't think I've gone this long without completing some major personal projects since I was maybe 13, possibly 12, because that's when I started like making one-shots. And from 14 till 16, 17-ish, I posted completed drawings every single week on Instagram. I think I only missed like once or twice. Like literally, I was very serious on Check Autism 101. So I've been kind of locked in on these two larger than average projects, which I soon realized were sort of taking time away from each other. Also, for this video, I realized I really did have to sit down with it and think through all of these little themes and choices I've been yapping about. Like, I promise you, every single frame, every single line in this video was thought through like 5 times. Every single thing was a choice. Every single thing. But being away from here genuinely makes me kind of remember what it is to live and not be performing in this way all the time. I'm performing in other ways all the time, and the performances never quite end. But I guess the character is given some level of depth that this frame doesn't always allow. However, for the past month, it's genuinely begun to hurt me not having this video out. Especially as discourse continues about everything. Damn, Sabrina Carpenter had to go and reignite everything. You know that clip of Miley Cyrus reminiscing about her culture vulturism I included was uploaded literally the day before I grabbed it for the edit because she just so happens to be releasing something now and doing press tours. Crazy. Also, I just want to move past the Sonic autism persona. I have more sides, you know, new thing, bigger thing, Assman era. Now I have a whole bunch of smaller projects, several Patreon exclusives that I want to do. A few things here. There's an interesting short video essay I want to upload here, even though the topic is a little bigger and has some implications that are tempting me to give it the main channel treatment, especially if the algorithm continues to punish me. I think I want my money. I want my money. I want my money. But I do want to keep it lighter, maybe to save some of those large implications for the anime video. I'm trying to keep this section from going on longer than it needs to, but there is genuinely so much happening in this video, and not all of it reaches the surface that overtly. On this channel, I voiced my hangups about the role I feel politically, and that is in here too. This video, like I've been saying, oh my god. This video, like I've been saying, is full of performance. There's lots of things I say that are half true, some points where the video itself contradicts my words. There's lots of dramatic irony. Like I said, even the title's ironic, but it is grounded in leftist theory. Of course, all the talking points are grounded in the theory of intersectionality, white supremacists, capitalists, patriarchy. I even include the bell hooks clips, yet the way I deliver a lot of the points is deliberately dizzying. I mentioned the points where I want the audience to question if I'm even qualified to be telling them anything. My main objective is to get you to think, not necessarily tell you what to think. Though I do postulate a bunch. I stripped any and all nuance with the doji section, man. I'm being so serious, y'all piss me off. But that's what this medium sort of requires. But ultimately, I do want the audience to pick up some of the pieces themselves. Perfect case in point, there's a point where I talk about how the role of the church and the dancehall, maybe I suggest that the role of the church and the dancehall are similar in how they function in a Jamaican context. I don't tell you necessarily what to do with that information. I just want to draw that parallel. You could take it many ways. From the very Marxist standpoint, you could go the opium route, and I do flash the word opium on screen once, you know, this is how they keep us pacified, this is why these institutions are kept in the inner city, and that's true. That is true. But you could also look at the communal aspect and how these institutions are necessary for organizing people of like mind. Maybe we could use that in a more productive way. Still very Marxist, but in a different way. I don't like telling people what to do or how to live their lives. I've always thought my greatest strength is encouraging people to think. That's why I don't like conclusion. Originally, for thematic reasons, I was considering just breaking the video before the conclusion and having it end with what became the montage you see at the end there, except I was gonna have stuff like interrupting me while I talk. Unfortunately, when writing though, I did actually have a somewhat coherent conclusion. I don't want to see as a political propagandist, though I will say in my absence here that energy has gone to the real world in a lot of ways, unfortunately. There is this raging Marxist, anarchist in me, and at this point I'm probably the furthest left person I know, but I don't know. The old internet box makes everything feel so performative. And ultimately, like I say, I think my art and how I write is more effective when I just get people to think rather than tell them what to think. This is what creates the real ethical questions of how political theory is engaged within my work. Like I might say, I think, and I think the video reflects this, I would consider myself to be an absurdist, a positive nihilist. Nothing inherently means anything, but you find joys and live your life anyway. To be honest, I'm not sure that this is the most useful thing to tell leftists when you're trying to amass a cause, especially when so many things are happening in the world right now. Why change the world if nothing means anything? If we're all doomed anyway, why continue to express ourselves or seek liberation? What the video does suggest is that ultimately those battles are not won here. Not on mics, not on screens, but in the real world. And truth be told, recent events around the world and in my own life, in my brief absence from here, I'm inclined to believe that. I think the internet box is fundamentally designed to be a playground, maybe graveyard, of ideas, depending on how pessimistic I'm feeling that day. And the real change is in what bits from here we take into the real world, and I do think that they are bits. I ended up as the big Marxist, anarchist, because my parents always taught me to stand up for what's right and be kind to people. All the internet did was expose me to ideas and information that interacted with those principles I already had. That's why with whatever esoteric artsy ambitions I had for this video, I made sure from the jump to ground it with facts and historical knowledge that a lot of you may not know. However you engage with the other ideas, let's make sure you come away with some useful information. And then it's when those ideas return to the real world that we see the change. But the screen is in the end just a vehicle, and it's a damn small one too. Questions. I've taught musical theater and dance for myself for years, so here's my background on the subject. I watched The Point for the first time last year, and the dancing fat ladies and the common misconception they're dancing for merriment and laughter really stuck with me. Dancing is often more than just moving to a beat, especially the type that has other bodies involved, and requires deep rehearsal and proper form and execution to practice before it reaches the point of art to the common viewer. Though some, myself included, would argue that even a little practice ass throw is art. Why do we consider motion to simply be a sensual joy and not a creation? Is it because it is temporary before we introduce cameras and audiences? Because we're enamored by the dancers themselves? Or is it a lack of comfort in our own skin and seeing other humans turn skin into skill? Even something highbrow as ballet is often reduced by many in the common populace as just little girls in tutus spinning around, unless it's in its final form as a performance. All dances, even the ones we perform alone in our kitchen in socks, require physical strength, rehearsal, and control of breath and force. Still, dancing is a joy, and it is a part of what it means to transcend being a human and enter a state of pure creation and bliss. Are we fearful to go through the door of our own strength? Can the dancer show us the way, or are we fixated on the door frame? Oh no, that was very nice. The original topic of the video was actually going to be the question of, is twerking art? But I decided against it because it seemed too ludicrous. Of course, dancing of any kind is art, but there arise more questions about what we're taught art even is. There's this idea that art is something that needs to be permanent. If it isn't written down or painted somewhere or done as some elaborate production, it isn't valid, which just isn't true. What I've been thinking about more and more recently is the idea of the temporal, as you see it here. I think there is, like you say, a fear almost of giving yourself up to the form of accepting those feelings that you get. Even vibing out in your kitchen is art. You're connecting to something. You're reaching beyond yourself for something. Experiencing those words, thoughts, sounds of others, and expressing that reflection through your body. I mean, I don't dance for people. I dance with myself. I think that there is a profound vulnerability there. Using your own body. Maybe the dancer should show us the way. I really like using a coin as a metaphor when talking about people, because a lot of the weird stuff people do isn't just connected to other weird stuff. It literally is the other weird stuff. Psychological. Every action has its equal and opposite. I theorize that detachment, a tool of racist people and racist society, an obsession with transgression, which Bell Hooks mentions is an obsession with blackness, when in an American context, are two sides of one coin. That being the I want to consume blackness coin. I argue social media is a great example of a racist tool of detachment. It normalizes black consumption. That's stuff like black people being dehumanized for entertainment, for sexual gratification, maybe even for education, without effectively enforcing things like respect or accountability. Consuming blackness is something you can end up relying on. It can get to a point where you define yourself through your method of black consumption, and through something you don't understand. There's no casual, chill way to do that. I argue that forcing is where racists build their conception of blackness as transgression. Not really a question, but Alexander Ellis typed a few interesting paragraphs I want to touch on because it's so interesting. I'm reminded that people like me do exist across different contexts. I'd go even further. Social media isn't merely racist, but the racism of social media is because it's inherently anti-human and enforces dehumanization in all its forms, which is what weaponizes the already existing racism in American and Western society as a whole. Black people in America and the West have always existed as this other, I should also note that the time the bell hooks clips came from was the late 90s, when there was a particular surge of transgressiveness in consumerism, the post-Tarantino era, that itself. But the way it manifests itself, even in meme culture, like in the club thing, has maybe just accelerated the obsession, because everything on the internet is so borrowed and there are no real walls or anything. That's resulted in how blatant the consumerism of it all is. This one you probably get a lot, so I apologize for that. But what does your writing process look like? I'll tell you my writing process, but I won't recommend it. For a regular essay for university, for example, what I do and what you should do is write an outline, gather your points, do research, and maybe write 3 or so drafts. First, to get the ideas on paper, second, to make it make sense, and third, to ensure that it's polished. What I do here, though, I just start typing. Though usually that's after I've been thinking about the topic or doing maybe a basic amount of research here and there, and then I just follow the thought train, writing the points as they flow out of me, doing further research as I write if and when I buck up on a point I'm not sure of or have to fact check, and keep going until I find that I have something on the page. For this video, that process took about 5.5 months. Then I read it over, rewrite, do further, more thorough research and fact checking. I might move some things around, some paragraphs might get cut and pasted around if I feel like the points flow better, some way or the other. And then I go over the third draft just to ensure everything's in order. But again, for these videos I tend to keep adding and rewriting and taking things away, even up to and after recording and editing, up to upload. To be honest, Alexander is back. Dr. Salem Washington came to my college last year and discussed his theory of perpetual versus the permanent avant-garde. It's a musical theory. In 2025, we have a specific concept of what avant-garde jazz is. Most people will think of the free jazz of the 60s. John Coltrane and Ornette Coleman are both considered to be of that movement. The theory is that this is not an accident, that avant-garde jazz is stuck in the 1960s because it was intentionally defined and institutionalized by the United States. Washington argues that there never was supposed to be a permanently avant-garde subgenre of jazz, because jazz as a genre was always avant-garde to its very core. That's what he called the perpetual avant-garde. He argues that the notion of permanent avant-garde is propaganda. He goes as far as arguing that this is a part of why jazz has effectively died in the US, and a part of why more modern jazz greats like Wynton Marsalis have not made waves like those who came before him. I want to expand on this and bring his theory as a lens through which to look at Basquiat and the avant-garde of his. In a similar vein, why is Basquiat's art still considered avant-garde 30 years after he passed? I'll push it a step further. Why is Basquiat's art still considered avant-garde when it has literally gone mainstream? I've had math tutors that have shown up in Basquiat-themed winter coats. I can go to my art supply store down the street and buy all types of Basquiat pencil cases and erasers and things. I argue that Basquiat's art was avant-garde. I'd argue that it's no longer avant-garde, not because it's not incredible, but because of how it's been studied, institutionalized, and commodified over the last 30 years. I acknowledge that Basquiat is not a jazz musician, and to be avant-garde in jazz may have much different connotation than in other mediums of art. If that's the case, then I guess he still is avant-garde. But the concept of perpetual and avant-garde is much cooler than permanent avant-garde. Regardless, I did mention before that we seem to share a brain. I won't go into the jazz history, but the very need for jazz to have a level of permanent avant-garde, as you said, signifies a certain need to institutionalize and in a sense kill it. Same reason why many people say that hip-hop is dead. It's that institutionalization and hyper-consumerism of it all. That point of why there are no jazz greats now actually reminds me of a thing that the anime community was talking about some years ago. I mentioned I'm making an anime video, right? And about why there are no classics anymore, in spite of there being so many more shows coming out with so much more availability than there used to be. But maybe that's not a coincidence. Maybe people used to go to anime because it was this avant-garde thing in the West, but it isn't anymore. And more people are watching different shows, which does go into some stuff about atomization, which is another thing. Anime video coming soon. But yes, The idea that perpetual avant-garde and innate creation to be against that which is institutionalized is interesting, though. I need to chew on that thought a little bit more. Does twerking become perverted if Western culture? If Western culture would change it so much that even African culture is going to see it as such, like how the Western gays changed African hairstyles, changing culture completely as expressed in your barber video? Of course. When I was researching the origins of how Mapoka emerged in Cote d'Ivoire back in the 90s, there was this controversy about how provocative it was, even there and then. Though that's another thing I wanted to touch on, just how much the Western gaze perverts how we engage with these things. Even if it is provocative, that's not necessarily a bad thing. In many cultures, many African and Asian cultures, there isn't this big moralistic judgment about sensuality and eroticism in art as there is in the West. If Mapoka is sexual, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But it can be, but it doesn't have to be. But again, culture to culture, there are these different sensibilities, and everyone's been in so many ways influenced by the West and Western thought. 2 questions. Did you feel relieved after making this video and still openly sharing your thoughts on this topic? Not just that, but do you think your videos help yourself mentally sometimes when you share these thoughts? First question, relieved is close how I feel. There's definitely a sense of catharsis, though also immense anxiety now that those thoughts are in the realm of ideas and subject to the scrutiny of the masses. I think the best catharsis and relief comes from when I finish a story, though. I do much prefer making fiction to these things. But like I said, so many of these thoughts have been swimming in my mind for so long, and getting them out finally does bring a certain peace to my mind. Second question, do you still play video games? I play chess on my phone. That's it. And that's it for this. Is already way too long. I was gonna yap, but oh god. I'll call it here. More things on the way. Watch the big video, maybe, or else. I hope the algorithm stops bullying me. I really don't get rewarded for doing this kind of thing on this platform. I really don't. Truly consider joining my Patreon if you appreciate my stuff, because it is genuinely kind of crazy out here. Goodbye.